You're listening to the Core Factors audio library, spoken versions of Core Factors articles and research. This piece is titled, Saying Less and Doing More: How Social Dynamics Simplifies Team Communication. The following narration preserves the original content and intent of the written article.
Saying Less and Doing More: How Social Dynamics Simplifies Team Communication. When more communication creates less clarity. Most teams communicate far more than they need to. They meet frequently, send countless messages, share documents, and provide updates intended to keep everyone informed. Yet despite this volume of communication, teams often feel less aligned. People walk into meetings unclear about priorities. Decisions need to be revisited because they were not fully understood. Updates generate more questions than answers. In many modern workplaces, communication has become so frequent and fragmented that it overwhelms the very clarity it aims to create. This paradox stems from a fundamental oversight. While work environments rely heavily on communication, they rarely address the behavioral differences that shape how people give, receive, and interpret information. When communication styles collide, or when communication is not aligned with the receiver's natural pattern, messages become longer, more repetitive, and more confusing than necessary. Social dynamics offers a way out of this cycle. By clarifying the behavioral patterns behind communication, teams can reduce overload and increase effectiveness. When patterns are understood, communication becomes simpler, shorter, and far more effective. The paradox: why more communication doesn't equal better communication. Many teams operate under a flawed assumption: the more they communicate, the more aligned they will become. In reality, communication without awareness of behavioral differences often increases confusion rather than clarity. Consider common scenarios. One person's summary feels incomplete to another. A detailed explanation feels overwhelming to someone who prefers brevity. A quick, direct message feels abrupt to someone who needs context. A collaborative, exploratory message feels unfocused to someone who values structure. Teams communicate frequently, yet misunderstanding persists. Three forces reinforce this pattern. First, people communicate through their natural behavioral patterns and assume others prefer information the same way they do. Second, people interpret messages through their own patterns, often assigning meaning that was never intended. Third, these differences are rarely discussed explicitly, so teams repeat the same miscommunications without realizing why. Social dynamics turns these blind spots into shared understanding by giving teams a framework to navigate communication intentionally instead of automatically. The 4 communication patterns. Each social dynamics pattern brings predictable tendencies to communication. These tendencies influence how much information someone prefers, how they share it, how they process it, and what they pay attention to. Understanding these patterns is essential for simpler, more effective communication. Mover: communicate for action. Movers value concise information that leads directly to movement. They prefer clarity about what needs to happen and appreciate direct language. Long explanations or context-heavy messages feel unnecessary. Communication that meanders or includes excessive detail creates friction rather than understanding. Involver: communicate for engagement. Involvers use communication to generate energy, connection, and shared enthusiasm. They often explore ideas out loud and think through conversation. For involvers, communication is relational as much as it is informational. Interaction helps them build momentum and buy-in. Mapper: communicate for clarity. Mappers want structured communication with clear expectations. They appreciate sequencing, rationale, and context. High-level summaries feel incomplete if they leave unanswered questions. Mappers need logical progression before they feel confident moving forward. Integrator: communicate for precision. Integrators value thoughtful communication that addresses nuance and implications. They want to understand reasoning, impact, and alignment. Abrupt or surface-level messages can feel careless or incomplete when precision matters. Teams often talk past one another not because clarity is missing, but because communication patterns are fundamentally mismatched. When patterns collide. Misalignment in communication follows predictable patterns. A mover's short message feels abrupt to an integrator. A mapper's structured explanation feels overwhelming to an involver. An involver's brainstorming feels scattered to a mover. An integrator's detailed questions feel slowing to a mapper. These mismatches increase communication volume because people must clarify and re-clarify their meaning. Over time, teams respond by adding more messages, more meetings, and more check-ins, efforts meant to prevent confusion that often created instead. Social dynamics helps teams streamline communication by encouraging people to communicate intentionally, not instinctively. How social dynamics helps teams say less and do more. Social dynamics provides a behavioral map that helps team members adjust communication to fit the receiver. When teams use this map, communication becomes clearer the first time. Misinterpretation decreases because behavior is understood as pattern-based, not personal. Messages become more targeted, reducing unnecessary detail. Decisions stick because expectations are clearer. Meetings shorten because fewer issues need revisiting. When people feel understood in how they receive information, trust increases. Communication becomes more efficient and more human at the same time. Practical ways teams can apply social dynamics immediately. Teams can begin simplifying communication through a few small, intentional practices. Start messages with purpose. Say what you need up front: a decision, input, alignment, or an update. Use the two-line communication technique. First line, the headline or purpose. Second line, the request or next step. Adjust communication to the receiver. Concise and actionable for movers. Structured and clear for mappers. Conversational and engaging for involvers. Thoughtful and thorough for integrators. Ask about preferences. Questions like, do you want the short version or full detail? Remove guesswork and save time. Clarify response expectations. Not every message requires an immediate response. Naming timing prevents frustration and misinterpretation. Use meetings intentionally. Match the meeting format to the goal: exploration, decision, alignment, or refinement. Eliminate meetings that don't serve a clear purpose. Understanding over volume. Communication problems are rarely solved by adding more messages. They are solved by aligning communication with how people naturally process information. When teams understand social dynamics patterns, communication becomes simpler, more efficient, and less exhausting. Messages get shorter because they get clearer. Collaboration improves because people feel understood. Saying less does not mean sharing less. It means communicating with intention. And when communication becomes easier, teams are freed to focus on what matters most: doing the work together.
This concludes the audio version of this Core Factors article. You can explore the full written version and additional practitioner resources at corefactors.com.